Hi, everyone. We can get started as more participants and attendees join. For those of you who may not know, I am Priya Bhutani. Thank you so much for joining us today. In today's webinar, we wanted to take a different approach. Today it'll be more presentation mode instead of the Q&A that we usually do. And what my colleague Baraa will be doing is comparing aspects of the new Saudi requirements with the EU MDR and talk about the various similarities among the two. And if you have any questions, you can ask us. But for those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, we are a holistic RIM solution with built-in regulatory intelligence and AI capability that helps RA teams prepare, manage, and publish global technical files within hours. Our platform provides daily updates on regulatory changes. To collaborate with distributors, it helps with registration tracking, standards management, and many workflows to address change assessments and other processes. Our clients are preparing and submitting global applications within days instead of months, and their audits have become more seamless. If you'd like to learn more or have any specific questions related to your business needs, we'd be happy to schedule a call to discuss further. With us today, I have my colleague, Baraa Nofal, who is based in the Middle East and specializes in the regulatory landscape of the Middle East region. Before we begin our discussion this morning, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Thank you again for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we will hold a brief Q&A. We encourage your participation, so please refer to the chat button on your screen. In the interest of time, please submit your questions throughout the course of our talk, and we will try to address as many of your questions as we can. In case we run out of time, please email your questions to us, and we'll try to address them via email. So today's webinar has come with on demand from our previous participants. A month ago in November, we had covered the topic of the new Saudi regulations, and Baraa had addressed all these new regulations and just summarized the key important facts you needed to know. And questions came up, and there's been a lot of comparisons being made to EU MDR and whether it is exact copy of the MDR. And so we'll find out today. Baraa, thank you. I will turn off my webcam, and so because today is more about Baraa sharing her screen and walking you through some aspects. Now, the disclaimer of today's conversation is that we're obviously not addressing every point of the new Saudi regulations, but we have taken the main components that came to us in requests from attendees addressing classification, PSURs, and those types of topics will be addressed today. Baraa, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. So I will share my screen to start the webinar. Priya, you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, but it's not in presentation mode. So I don't know if you want to do it in presentation mode or just do it this way.
Okay. Sorry. I will take it as this. The other slides appears also?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good evening from my side, because I'm talking with you from Jordan. It's PM now, it's not AM, so good morning and good evening for everyone joins us. Today, our webinar will be about a brief comparison between a Saudi FDA and EU MDR regulation. Our references taken from the Saudi FDA last guideline published about the requirements for the registration of medical devices in Saudi FDA, which is MDS Rec 1 version number 6, published in 19 of December 2021. And other guideline for the classification, the update was published yesterday, MDS G008 version 2, 13 of December this year. For this guideline, there is nothing updated, the same as we already discussed in our last webinar, but they changed the name and make it more brief than the previous. But there is nothing major changes in the classification, because the classification remains the same. For the EU MDR, and on the other hand, I referred to the guideline of the MDR that published during or the 5th of April of 2017. So firstly, when we will talk about the medical devices classifications, we all aware that the manufacturer is the responsible for determining the classification of a device. And when they need to classify their product, they need to rely on some rules. And determining these rules will be based on four mandatory points: the manufacturer's intended use of the device, and the level of risk to the patient, degree of invasiveness or in the body, and duration of use. And in the other hand, maybe we will say it as the authority described it in the guidelines. Even in EU or Saudi FDA, they are described the rules the same. They are 22 rules based on if the medical device is invasive, non-invasive, if it is active device. And from rule 14 to 22, there is a special rules specific to classify your device. And there's a note from Saudi FDA. I take it if identical devices maybe sometimes identical devices may be classified differently because they are used in different parts of the body. So in this case, we need to back to the instruction for use or the label or manufacturing advertising materials or technical documentation to make the correct decision for the classification. In parallel with the back to the rules. What I mean, we need to back to instruction for use and labels. That means we need to just understand the way how we can use the device, and then back to the rules to decide which class we can classify our product. So here I present the classification for Saudi FDA and the EU MDR. Actually, there are different and alphabetical or EU MDR. They use the numerical way, but they are the same. For example, class A, which represents the low risk medical devices, it's compatible with the class 1, which is also the low risk medical devices. Then class B, C, and D as the risk level. For example, class B is low to moderate, class C moderate to high, and class D is high, which is the same for EU MDR. Class 1 is low, class 2A low to moderate, class 2B moderate to high, class 3 is high. And I will represent an example to make you to decide, not to decide, sorry, to make sure that the class A is the same as class 1 and C and blah, blah, blah. So for example, here I put an example about non-invasive devices. I took it from the Saudi FDA REC 1 guideline and MDR guideline, and they represent the same example, and they have the same classification. For example, all non-invasive devices which come into contact with injured skin or mucous membrane are classified as class A in Saudi FDA and in MDR class 1. And in case if they are intended to be used principally for injuries to skin, they classify in Saudi FDA class C and in MDR class 2B, and the same for the remaining points. I will not read it as it is, but what I need to explain that the classification itself, the rules itself, the guidelines, how to classify your products, they are identical 100%. They only difference in the naming of the class, but everything is the same. And I think when you classify your product in EU and you have already registered your device with, for example, class A, I think you can submit it to the authority as a class A. And if you have a concern about your classification for Saudi FDA, and even if you have assure 100% that you are submitting the correct class, Saudi FDA, they offer a classification service through their website. So you can submit your application to classify the product. And but this procedure will be done from the authorized representative, not from the manufacturer. So if you have any concern, and if you're afraid to receive a rejection about the classification, because Saudi FDA, if you classify your product in a correct way, they will reject or they will return your file again to reclassify, and maybe you will lose the fees. So in order to prevent this case, I advise you to submit for the classification service and Saudi FDA to make sure you have the classification correctly. After that, I will start speaking about registration requirements. Before I speak about this slide, and before I am comparing between Saudi FDA and EU MDR, just a note, in Saudi FDA, you should hire or you should contract with authorized representative in Saudi Arabia. And before talking about the major requirements for the file, you need to do a medical device registry number, MDNR, via MDNR website, because this step is the first step when you need to submit for the registration Saudi FDA. When you take the MDNR number, this does not mean you have an approval to market your product or to import your product to Saudi Arabia. It's just give the authority a serial number or a number to refer to your into your manufacture to your industry or facilities and your product. So it's just something for Saudi Arabia to merge it with your product and to make the file better when they review or assess your file. After that, you need to submit a general document as the labeling and the ISO certificate and other documents. This is the major general documents. I just want to refer to it. And then, as we discussed in the previous webinar, we discussed that Saudi Arabia, they implement the technical file documentation and they requested for all the classification, and they removed the low risk or listing procedure from the new guideline. So here in the registration requirements, I write down there is a similarity, or we can say it is a 99.9%, but I'm pretty sure to say it is identical 100%, but we need to say 99.9%. They have the same requirements in both markets, but with different subjects. For example, when I read the MDR, they have state GSPR, which is the General Safety Performance Requirements, which is listed in the technical file and exactly in the essential principles. In Saudi FDA, they have essential principles for the safety and efficacy. So maybe I can say the GSPR, it's similar to the essential principles section from the technical file, and the technical file is include all the things, the GSPR and other technical documentation, because also MDR have a section include the technical documentation. So Saudi FDA, they implemented the new requirements included in the MDS Rec 1, which is, I already talked about it, which is the technical file documentation and the safety concerns or the risk management plan. and they needed to be submitted for the new medical devices registration. And even for the devices that already registered, they request from in the renewal, they request the manufacturers to submit the technical file, because they need all the devices to submit their technical file. Actually, on the December of this month, the EU Commission released that there is an extension for Saudi FDA. Till now, we do not have any updates if they need to do same thing, if they need to provide more flexible things about the technical documentation to be submitted, maybe as EU decided for. So as the EU decided, since EU Commission proposed extension was done last week, and for the Class 2B and Class 3 products to be submitted during, or sorry, the proposed date to be 2027, and for the low risk classes, Class 2A and Class 1 for 2028. So till now, for Saudi FDA, we do not have any updates, but for EU MDR, this was released last week, and this is not an approval, because it was discussed in the commission, and we have the approval, but it will be done maybe early 2023, early next year. So I will start talking about the medical devices technical file documentation. I will not go deep in details. It may be this section will be the same as the previous one we had in our first webinar, but I need to say it again, because the technical file documentation same as EU MDR. For example, the technical documentation, the first thing you need to provide is the device description and specification, including variants and accessories. In these sections, for example, in a brief, this section include product or trade name, code, description, intended users of the device, and the classification, etc. The second one is the information to be provided by the manufacturer. When we say that, the first thing I can say it as an example is the labeling of the device or the packaging, for example, the instruction for use, and any promotional material as applicable. The third thing is design and manufacturing information, which include full device description, applied parts, or in a conclusion, it will everything about the manufacturing steps of this device to be described, how we design the device, how the manufacturer step it end up with this device. The fourth point is the essential principles of safety and performance, which is I already said about it. It's similar to GSPR. But it have a lot of additional things, not only the risk and other points. And the essential principles of safety and performance, they divided to 3 sections, and these sections include general requirements regarding design and manufacturing, requirements regarding information supplied with the device. This information, when you read it, you may be said it's the same, for example, with the points I said earlier. Yes, they are the same, maybe, but they include more details, or they have the description for each document, how you need to submit it, or what is needed to be included in this section. For example, the requirement in the section 23, requirements regarding information supplied with the device. As I said, also in this section, we will talk about the labeling or the instruction for use. If you will refer to the guideline MDS Rec 1 and check the section 23, you will see a lot, maybe more than 4 pages, just talking about the labeling and the data needed to be found in the labeling and instruction for use. So the essential principle of safety and performance is it's not about only the safety of the device, about the risk management plan and so on. It's also about everything related to the product, and they tell you exactly every documents what you need to be submitted. After that, we will talk about the benefit risk analysis and risk management, and this is a big problem to the companies, because not all companies they are prepared to that. So it is a very important point. And for the risk management, you should it should be documented, and its minimum should be contained about four points, which is the procedure of the risk management you are doing, your risk management plan, because the authority need to understand the risk management plan, not to receive the reports. They will not accept receiving the risk analysis or the risk report only. They need to read your procedure, your risk project, your risk management plan, and risk analysis and risk management report for sure. After that, product verification and validation. This section of the technical documentation lists the methods and standards used to verify and validate the product. The documentation shall contain the result and the critical analysis of all verifications and validation tests and or studies undertaken to demonstrate conformity of the device. So this section is very important, and for Saudi FDA, they imported more than 100%, because this section will reflect to the authority, yes, the device have conformity and is valid and is verified. So the section is very, very important. Maybe I don't have the time to describe the product verification and validation, but maybe next webinar we can do a webinar for this section only, because Saudi FDA they interested very much, and they need an effort from the manufacturer to do it, to avoid any rejection for your file. The post-market surveillance plan is for the post-market surveillance plan, I will say the most important of the what I described it here, that the evaluation of most post-market surveillance experience can also highlight opportunities to improve the medical device. This is the purpose of this plan. So if we have a post-market surveillance plan, it will lead us to improve our medical devices, and it is very important to the authorities, because they need to have a look to your device, and to for next year or for upcoming years they need an improvement, and maybe they will have a point to assess your file more correctly to be approved in next years. Okay, now we will say the last thing, I think. Yeah, we will talk about the periodic safety update reports and post-market surveillance reports. It is also from the technical file. It's the last document in the technical file. It is most important. The goal of both reports, the post-market surveillance report and the BSUR, the goal of both reports is to provide authorities or the designated office with a rapid overview of the post-market activities, in particular the implementation of the plan, the data collected, the conclusion and actions. This will give the authorities a summaries and give them an eye about if there was any defect or any serious defect in the medical devices to address, and to know what is the action to address this defect. And for the post-market surveillance reports, it's for EU and Saudi FDA. By the way, all of the things I already said is applied to Saudi FDA, and for EU MDR, they totally the same, but as I said earlier, they different just for class A or class 1. For example, for the post-market surveillance report, manufacturers of class 1 and class A, as Saudi FDA, they need to submit their surveillance reports, whereas classes B, 2A, and classes C or 2B, classes D and 3, they need to submit the BSUR, and the BSUR shall set out the conclusion of the benefit risk determination, the main findings of the post-market clinical follow-up, BMS, BMCF, and the volume of sales of the device and the estimate of the size and other characteristics. These are the main 3 points. If one of them not found in the BSUR, the authorities were rejected. I'm talking about the Saudi FDA. They will not accept a BSUR not include one of these points. And last but not least, the manufacturer of class C or 2B and class D or 3, they need to submit or update the BSUR at least annually. Why we say at least annually? Because these classes are high risk, and maybe they will receive a lot of defects. Manufacturers of class P or 2A devices shall update the BSUR when necessary, when at least every 2 years. And by that, I'm ending the presentation, and I hope you understand what I said, and I'm sure you now are happy about that the MDR is the same as the Saudi FDA, but I think a lot of the question maybe I will receive if the authority will extend as MDR, and I will say I don't have the answer, since the authority, they do not announce anything, but till now the authority advised us to submit the technical file for any new medical device registration, and also for in vitro medical devices, but our webinar now was for medical devices. So now feel free to ask, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Baraa, for that information. So the questions are, will you email slides of the webinar? We certainly will. The other question is, with the European Commission's announcement to postpone implementation, as we heard that, timelines for EU MDR, do we expect a similar announcement from the SFDA? They haven't made any announcement yet, right? Are they planning on?
Yeah, they didn't have any announcement, but I think the Saudi FDA will follow the MDR. But as I said, we cannot say they will do. We will wait until they raise any circular.
Yeah. What are the requirements for grouping of products for one MDMA certificate? So are there any requirements for grouping of products?
Yeah, there is a requirements for the bundling or grouping and the MDS Rec 1. Maybe he can send us a RegDesk for more information about that.
Does an MDR up classification mean a re-registration with the SFDA? So if MDR is up classifying, then would that require new registration with the SFDA?
Can you repeat the question, because I
so
didn't?
If let's say a product has been up classified per MDR requirements, then would that mean that with Saudi you would have to re-register that product?
Yeah, so the asking about if the product is classified in upper class or a higher class in EU, so we need to re-register in other class in Saudi Arabia?
Yes, I would imagine that, just because it's been up classified in the EU, I don't think SFDA is saying that because it's been up classified in the EU that now automatically you have to re-register. I don't think it's an automated process. Yeah.
No, yeah, I already said they are the same classifications, but Saudi FDA, they refer to their classifications. So you need to classify your product based on Saudi Arabia and follow their requirements. I just made a comparison between the EU and Saudi FDA, but this does not mean if the product is classified in EU class D, for example, I should classify it as a class 3. Maybe it will be something else in the Saudi FDA, so you will not rely on that only.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not an automatic that it is. I mean, obviously SFDA has used EU MDR as their gold standard for the new regulations, but they're not saying that if you do this with the EU, then you have to do it with us.
Exactly.
They're saying, listen, we have our own process, follow our process separately compared to EU MDR, even though it's
Exactly
the same. We're running out of time. We actually have a few more questions. We will address these questions via email. And if any other questions come up, please do let us know. But thank you again. Thank you, Baraa, for the presentation. And thank you all to all our attendees for once again partaking in our webinar. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics, please do let us know. We're excited about bringing new series of webinars in the upcoming months and the next year. Happy holidays to everyone and Happy New Year.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.